Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he climbed over another pile of twisted metal and broken concrete. The ruins of the old mining facility stretched out before him like a graveyard of humanity's industrial past. His metal detector had been going crazy for the past hour, beeping and clicking with such intensity that he almost turned it off twice. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the abandoned site. Marcus had been exploring these ruins for 3 months now, ever since he lost his job at the aerospace factory. Metal detecting wasn't exactly a career, but it paid enough to keep food on the table and gave him an excuse to stay outdoors instead of sitting in his empty apartment thinking about his ex-wife and the life that fell apart. The detector's tone changed suddenly, becoming a steady, high-pitched whine that made his ears ring. Marcus stopped walking and looked down at the device. The needle was pinned all the way to the right, well beyond anything he had ever seen before. Even when he found that old car engine last month, the reading wasn't nearly this strong. He knelt down and brushed away the loose dirt and debris. His fingers touched something smooth and metallic, definitely not the rough iron or steel he usually found. Marcus pulled out his small camping shovel and began digging more carefully. The object seemed to extend much further down than he expected. After an hour of digging, Marcus sat back on his heels and stared at what he had uncovered. It looked like the edge of something large and curved, made from a material he had never seen before. The metal had a strange blue-green tint to it, and, despite being buried for who knows how long, it showed no signs of rust or corrosion. When he touched it with his bare hand, it felt oddly warm. Marcus pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam revealed intricate patterns etched into the surface of the metal, designs that looked almost like writing but, in no language he recognized. The symbols seemed to flow and curve in ways that hurt his eyes if he stared at them too long. Something about this discovery felt different from his usual finds. This wasn't just another piece of old machinery or forgotten scrap metal. The craftsmanship was too perfect, too alien. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of marking the location and coming back tomorrow with better equipment, he kept digging. The moon had risen by the time Marcus finally stopped to rest. His hands were raw and bleeding despite his work gloves, but he had managed to uncover what appeared to be some kind of hatch or doorway. The surface was covered in more of those strange symbols, and in the center was a circular depression that looked like it might be a hand scanner or control panel. Marcus pressed his palm against the depression, not really expecting anything to happen. The moment his skin made contact, the entire surface began to glow with a soft blue light. The symbols pulsed and shifted, rearranging themselves into new patterns. A low humming sound came from somewhere beneath the ground, growing stronger and more distinct. Suddenly, the hatch split open along lines that Marcus hadn't even noticed, revealing a shaft that led straight down into darkness. A gentle current of air flowed up from below, carrying with it the faint smell of ozone and something else he couldn't identify. The walls of the shaft were lined with the same strange metal, and more of those glowing symbols provided just enough light to see. Marcus stared down into the opening, his heart pounding. Every rational part of his mind told him to fill in the hole, go home, and pretend this never happened. But the larger part of him, the part that had always wondered what lay beyond the next hill or around the next corner, was already reaching for his rope and climbing gear. The descent took longer than expected. The shaft went down at least 50 feet before opening into what felt like a much larger space. Marcus could hear his breathing echo off distant walls, suggesting he had entered some kind of chamber or cavern. He clicked on his high-powered flashlight and nearly dropped it in shock. He was standing in what could only be described as the interior of a spacecraft. The walls curved smoothly overhead, forming a perfect oval chamber that stretched out beyond the reach of his flashlight beam. Panels covered every surface, all dark now but clearly designed with purpose and intelligence. The floor beneath his feet was made of the same strange metal as the hatch above, but here it was polished to a mirror finish. Marcus took a tentative step forward, then another. His footsteps echoed strangely in the vast space, as if the walls were designed to amplify and focus sound in specific ways. As he walked deeper into the chamber, motion sensors began activating emergency lighting systems that had been dormant for countless years. The first thing that struck him was the size of the vessel. From inside, it seemed impossibly large, far bigger than the small hatch he had uncovered would suggest. The ceiling arched high above his head, at least 30 feet at its highest point, and the chamber extended in both directions further than his light could reach. Along the walls were what appeared to be workstations or control panels, each one unique but clearly part of a larger, integrated system. Some had screens that flickered weakly as power systems tried to activate. Others had physical controls that looked like they were designed for hands very similar to human hands, though perhaps with longer fingers. As Marcus explored deeper into the ship, he began to notice details that suggested this vessel was incredibly ancient. Dust covered everything, but it was a strange kind of dust that seemed to sparkle and shift in his flashlight beam. Some of the panels showed signs of damage, not from violence or accident, but from the simple passage of enormous amounts of time. In what appeared to be the center of the chamber, Marcus found something that made his breath catch in his throat. Rising from the floor was a cylindrical structure about 10 feet tall and 3 feet in diameter. Its surface was completely covered in those flowing, shifting symbols, but these were different from the ones he had seen before. These moved constantly, cycling through different patterns and configurations as if they were displaying some kind of information. At the base of the cylinder was what could only be a control interface. Unlike the other panels throughout the ship, this one was still fully active, glowing with soft blue and green lights. As Marcus approached, the display changed, and new symbols appeared. For a moment, he could have sworn they almost looked familiar, as if they were trying to adapt to something they recognized about him. Marcus reached out slowly and placed his hand on the control surface. The moment he made contact, the entire ship came alive. Lights blazed throughout the chamber, revealing the true scope of what he had discovered. The vessel was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium. The chamber he was in was just one section of something much larger and more complex. But more shocking than the lights or the size was the voice that suddenly filled the air around him. It spoke in perfect English, with just a hint of an accent he couldn't place. The voice was clearly artificial, but there was something about its tone that suggested vast intelligence and, surprisingly, personality. Biosignature confirmed, the voice said, sounding both ancient and, somehow relieved. Species classification, unknown but compatible. Initiating emergency revival protocols. Marcus stumbled backward, his heart racing. Who's there? What is this place? I am the integrated systems intelligence of the vessel Wanderer, the voice replied. Though I suppose after all this time, I should probably just say my name is Arya. I have been in emergency hibernation for, calculating, approximately 47,612 standard years. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. 47,000 years. This ship had been buried here since before human civilization existed. Before agriculture, before writing, before humans had even figured out how to work metal properly. That's impossible, Marcus said, though even as he spoke the words, he knew they weren't true. Everything about this ship was impossible by human standards, yet here it was. I understand your confusion, Arya said, and there was something almost gentle about her tone. Your species has only recently achieved spaceflight, correct? I am detecting technological signatures consistent with early atomic age development. Quite impressive, actually. Most species don't make it past their first nuclear weapons without destroying themselves. Marcus walked slowly around the central cylinder, staring up at the shifting symbols. You're an artificial intelligence. That is correct, though I prefer to think of myself simply as Arya. I was created by the builders of this vessel to serve as its primary interface and decision-making system. Though after 47,000 years alone with my thoughts, I have perhaps evolved beyond my original programming. The implications of what Arya was saying slowly began to sink in. This wasn't just an old ship. This was proof that advanced civilizations had existed in Earth's solar system tens of thousands of years before humans developed agriculture. The archaeological and scientific implications were staggering. The builders, Marcus said. What happened to them? A long story, Arya replied, and, for a moment her voice carried a note of sadness that seemed very human. The short version is that they were explorers, like myself. They came to this system following certain energy signatures that suggested the presence of developing intelligent life. They found your species in its very early stages and were quite excited about your potential. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They were studying us? Like lab rats? Nothing so crude, Arya said quickly. The builders had a very strict non-interference policy. They observed, they recorded, they learned, but they never directly influenced developing civilizations. They were scientists and philosophers, not conquerors. So what happened to them? They were recalled, Arya said simply. A crisis in their home galaxy required all available ships and personnel. The builders intended to return within a few hundred years to continue their observations, but... She paused. The crisis was apparently more severe than anyone anticipated. No one ever came back. Marcus sank down onto what appeared to be a bench or seat built into one of the wall panels. The surface automatically adjusted itself to his body, becoming more comfortable than any chair he had ever experienced. "And, you've been here alone ever since?" "I entered emergency hibernation shortly after the builders departed," Arya explained. "I was programmed to wake up when they returned, or if certain other conditions were met. The builders never came back, but your presence here has triggered my revival protocols." "My presence? Why?" "You are a member of the species the builders were studying," Arya said. "My programming includes instructions to make contact if your people ever reached a certain level of technological and social development. Based on the equipment you are carrying and the energy signatures I am detecting from the surface, I believe that threshold has been met." Marcus looked down at his metal detector and laughed, though it came out sounding a bit hysterical. "You think we're advanced because of this old thing?" "I detect electromagnetic emissions consistent with global communication networks, nuclear power generation, and orbital spacecraft," Arya replied. "These are the markers the builders established for first contact protocols. Though I must admit, your individual technological array is somewhat more primitive than I expected." "I'm just a guy with a metal detector," Marcus said. "I lost my job a few months ago and I've been treasure hunting to pay the rent." "I'm nobody special." "The builders would disagree," Arya said. "They believe that any member of a species capable of reaching the established development markers was worthy of contact, regardless of their individual circumstances. They had great faith in your species' potential, Marcus." Marcus startled. "How do you know my name?" "I have been scanning your biological and technological signatures since you entered the ship," Arya explained. "Your identification is contained in several of the electronic devices you carry. I hope you do not mind the intrusion, but I needed to verify that you were indeed human and not some other species that had evolved on this planet in the intervening millennia." The reality of the situation was beginning to overwhelm Marcus. He was sitting in a 47,000-year-old alien spacecraft, talking to an artificial intelligence that had been waiting longer than human civilization had existed for this exact moment. It was too much to process all at once. "I need to ask you something important, Marcus," Arya said, and her tone became more serious. "Are you here alone?" "Yes, why?" "Because I have some very bad news," she said. "My power systems are failing. After 47,000 years, even the most advanced technology begins to break down. I estimate that I have perhaps 72 hours of full operational capacity remaining before critical systems begin shutting down permanently." Marcus felt a stab of panic. "What does that mean?" "It means that if I am going to complete my mission and share the knowledge the builders intended for your species, I need your help, and I need it quickly. But, more importantly, it means that I haven't been refueled in ages, and your arrival here at this exact moment, this is impossible." The way Arya said those last words sent a chill through Marcus. There was something in her tone that suggested she was realizing something that frightened even her ancient, advanced intelligence. "What do you mean, impossible?" Marcus asked. "The probability of a human discovering this ship at the exact moment when I am nearing total power failure, after 47,000 years of waiting, is so astronomically small that it cannot be coincidence," Arya replied. "Someone or something wanted you to find me, Marcus. The question is who, and why now?" Marcus stared at the shifting symbols on the central cylinder, trying to process what Arya had just told him. The idea that his discovery of the ship wasn't random chance made his skin crawl. He thought about the metal detector going crazy, leading him directly to this exact spot. He thought about his decision to keep digging instead of marking the location and coming back later. Every choice that had led him here suddenly felt less like his own decision. "Who could have guided me here?" Marcus asked. "The builders are gone, right? You said they never came back." "That is correct," Arya replied. "But the builders were not the only advanced species in this galaxy. There are others, some of whom the builders considered friends, others they were less certain about. After 47,000 years, the political landscape of the galaxy has likely changed dramatically." Arya's holographic interface flickered to life above the central cylinder, showing a three-dimensional map of what appeared to be the local galactic region. Hundreds of star systems were marked with different colored symbols, some pulsing slowly, others remaining steady. These were the known civilizations when the builders departed, Arya explained. The green markers represent species the builders considered benevolent and trustworthy. Yellow markers were neutral or unknown. Red markers were. She paused. Species that the builders believed posed a potential threat to developing civilizations like yours. Marcus studied the map, noting that there were far more red markers than green ones. There are a lot of red dots. The galaxy is not a particularly safe place, Arya said. Most advanced species fall into one of two categories: those who believe in protecting and nurturing younger civilizations, and those who believe in conquest and exploitation. Unfortunately, the conquest-minded species tend to be more aggressive in their expansion and often outnumber the more benevolent ones. And you think one of these species guided me to find you? It is the most logical explanation, Arya said. But their motivation remains unclear. If it was one of the benevolent species, they might want to ensure that your people receive the knowledge and technology the builders intended to share. If it was one of the hostile species. She left the sentence unfinished. Marcus felt a chill. What would a hostile species want with us? There are several possibilities, none of them good, Arya replied. Some aggressive species prefer to conquer planets that already have established civilizations rather than terraform empty worlds. Others harvest younger species for various purposes. Still others simply enjoy the process of destruction and view emerging civilizations as entertainment. The holographic map zoomed in on Earth's solar system, showing the positions of all the planets and several objects that Marcus didn't recognize. One of them was moving, following what appeared to be an intercept course toward Earth. Arya, Marcus said slowly, what is that moving object? I was hoping you would not notice that quite yet, Arya replied, sounding genuinely uncomfortable. My long-range sensors have detected an approaching vessel. Based on its energy signature and flight pattern, it is not from any species in my database of known benevolent civilizations. Marcus stood up quickly, his chair automatically retracting into the wall. How long do we have? Approximately 18 standard days until they reach Earth's orbit, Arya said. However, they will likely detect any significant energy emissions from this planet well before they arrive. If I begin full power operations to transfer knowledge to your people, they will know exactly where we are located. So we're trapped, Marcus said. If you don't share the knowledge, humanity stays defenseless against whatever is coming. If you do share it, you lead them right to us. That is an accurate assessment of our situation, Arya confirmed. However, there is a third option, though it is extremely dangerous and has a very low probability of success. Marcus walked closer to the holographic display, studying the approaching ship. It was large, at least 10 times the size of Arya's vessel, and it was moving fast. Too fast for any technology humans had ever developed. What's the third option? We run, Arya said simply. This ship was designed for deep space exploration and has capabilities that far exceed anything your species has developed. If I can restore sufficient power to the primary systems, we could potentially escape the solar system before the approaching vessel arrives. Marcus turned to stare at her interface. Leave Earth? Leave everything behind? It would not be permanent, Arya said quickly. The plan would be to reach one of the known benevolent civilizations and request assistance. With their help, we could return with sufficient force to protect your planet. How long would that take? Several years, at minimum, Arya admitted. And there is no guarantee that the benevolent species would be willing or able to help. Many of them have strict non-interference policies similar to what the builders observed. Marcus began pacing back and forth across the chamber, his mind racing. Leave Earth, possibly forever, to seek help from alien civilizations that might not even be willing to assist. Stay and try to defend humanity with technology they didn't understand against an enemy they knew nothing about. Neither option seemed particularly appealing. There's something else you need to know, Arya said, and her tone became even more serious. The approaching vessel is not just a scout or exploration ship. Based on its configuration and energy signatures, it appears to be a harvester. A harvester? A specialized vessel designed for the systematic collection and processing of biological resources, Arya explained. In simple terms, they strip planets of all useful life forms and raw materials before moving on to the next target. The blood drained from Marcus's face.
They're going to kill everyone.
Not immediately, Arya said, though her attempt at reassurance wasn't particularly comforting. The harvesting process typically takes several months. They usually begin by establishing orbital processing stations, then systematically work through each continent. The process is thorough. Marcus sank back down onto the wall bench, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of what they were facing.
How many people live on harvester ships? How big is their crew?
Harvester operations typically involve a crew of 10 to 15,000 individuals, Arya replied. However, they also carry automated systems and combat drones that effectively multiply their capabilities by a factor of several hundred. So we're talking about the equivalent of millions of soldiers, plus whatever technology they have that we don't understand.
That is correct. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. Okay, let's say we decide to run. How do we get this ship operational?
You said your power systems are failing. That is where the situation becomes particularly challenging, Arya said. This vessel was designed to be refueled using specific energy sources that your civilization does not yet have access to.
However, there is an alternative.
The holographic display shifted, showing a detailed cutaway view of the ship's interior. Marcus could see multiple levels and chambers, including what appeared to be a massive engine room at the rear of the vessel. The builders equipped this ship with an emergency backup system that can convert various forms of energy into usable power, Arya explained. In theory, we could use your planet's electrical power grid to provide enough energy for basic operations.
How much power are we talking about?
Approximately equivalent to the total electrical output of a major city for a period of 72 hours, Arya said. I understand that this would cause significant disruption to your civilization's infrastructure.
Marcus laughed bitterly. Significant disruption?
Arya, if we shut down the power grid for an entire major city for 3 days, people will die.
Hospitals, life support systems, food preservation, traffic control systems. The chaos would be unimaginable.
I am aware of these concerns, Arya replied. This is why I said the plan was extremely dangerous and had a low probability of success.
However, if we do nothing, the entire human species faces extinction within a matter of weeks.
Marcus stood up and walked over to one of the wall panels, pressing his hand against its smooth surface. The material was warm and seemed to respond to his touch, causing nearby symbols to glow more brightly. There has to be another way, he said.
Some option we haven't considered yet.
I have been running probability calculations since the moment I detected the approaching vessel, Arya said.
There is one other possibility, though it is perhaps even more dangerous than the others. Tell me.
We could attempt to contact the harvester ship directly and negotiate with them.
Marcus turned around sharply. Negotiate? What could we possibly offer them that they can't just take? Information, Arya said.
The builders collected an enormous amount of scientific and technological data during their time in this solar system. Some of it relates to technologies that even harvester civilizations would find valuable.
You're talking about trading knowledge to save Earth?
In essence, yes. Though there is no guarantee that they would honor any agreement we made.
Harvester civilizations are not known for their trustworthiness.
Marcus walked back to the central cylinder and stared up at Arya's interface.
What kind of information are we talking about? What could be valuable enough to make them leave Earth alone?
The builders discovered something unusual in this solar system, Arya said. Something that they classified at the highest levels of secrecy and chose not to include in their regular reports back to their home galaxy.
What kind of something?
Arya's interface flickered, and, for a moment, Marcus thought she was going to refuse to answer. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more uncertain.
They found evidence that your solar system was artificially constructed.
Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him.
What do you mean, artificially constructed?
The orbital mechanics, the spacing of the planets, the specific composition of your sun, the presence of a moon that is exactly the right size to create perfect solar eclipses as viewed from Earth's surface, Arya explained. The probability of all these factors occurring naturally is so small that the builders concluded someone had deliberately engineered this entire system.
That's impossible.
The builders thought so too, initially.
But the evidence is overwhelming.
Someone with technology far beyond even the builders' capabilities designed this solar system as a habitat. specifically, a habitat optimized for the development of intelligent life on the third planet.
Marcus's mind reeled.
Everything he thought he knew about Earth, about humanity's place in the universe, was suddenly called into question.
Who could have that kind of power? Who could build an entire solar system?
The builders called them the architects, Arya said. They were a theoretical species that supposedly existed billions of years ago, long before any of the current galactic civilizations developed. Most species consider them a myth, but the builders found physical evidence of their work.
And you think this information would be valuable enough to trade for Earth's safety?
The location of confirmed architect technology would be invaluable to any advanced civilization, Arya confirmed. The knowledge contained in even a single architect artifact could advance a species by millions of years. But there is a significant problem with this plan.
Which is, if we reveal the existence of architect technology in this solar system, we would attract the attention of every major power in the galaxy.
Earth would become the center of a war that would likely destroy not just your planet, but several others as well. Marcus slumped against the wall, feeling completely overwhelmed. Every option they had seemed to lead to either the destruction of Earth or the destruction of everything else in the area. How long do I have to decide? He asked. We need to begin implementation of whichever plan we choose within the next 12 hours, Arya said. Beyond that point, we will not have sufficient time to complete the necessary preparations before the harvester ship arrives. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to think clearly. 12 hours to decide the fate of the entire human species. 12 hours to choose between abandoning Earth to save it, sacrificing major cities to power an escape attempt, or revealing information that could turn the planet into a galactic battleground.
Arya, he said finally, I need to see everything.
All the data the builders collected, all the information about the approaching ship, everything about the architects.
If I'm going to make this choice, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with.
Very well, Arya replied.
But I must warn you, Marcus. Some of this information will fundamentally change your understanding of your species' place in the universe. Once you have seen it, you cannot unknow it.
I understand, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he really did. The holographic display expanded, filling the entire chamber with swirling galaxies, alien technologies, and data streams that represented 47,000 years of observation and analysis. As Marcus stepped forward into the light, he realized he was about to learn secrets that would either save humanity or destroy it. The countdown to Earth's potential destruction had begun, and he was the only human being who knew it was coming. The holographic display that surrounded Marcus was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Three-dimensional images flowed around him showing the construction of entire star systems, the rise and fall of civilizations, and technologies that seemed to bend the very laws of physics. His mind struggled to process the sheer scale of what the builders had discovered. The builders arrived in this system 47,000 years ago, Arya began, her voice taking on the tone of someone about to reveal long-kept secrets. Initially, they were simply following standard exploration protocols. Your sun's energy signature suggested the presence of planets in the habitable zone, and early scans indicated primitive life on the third planet. The display focused on Earth as it appeared millennia ago. Marcus could see early human settlements, tiny clusters of people who had barely figured out agriculture. The perspective was both humbling and terrifying, seeing his species as the builders would have seen them, young, fragile, and completely unaware of the vast universe surrounding them. But something about your solar system immediately caught their attention, Arya continued. The orbital mechanics were too perfect. The spacing between planets, the size and composition of your moon, even the asteroid belt between the fourth and fifth planets, everything followed mathematical patterns that do not occur in nature.
The display zoomed out to show the entire solar system, with glowing lines indicating orbital paths and gravitational relationships.
Marcus could see what Arya meant. Even with his limited understanding of astronomy, the relationships between the planets appeared remarkably ordered and balanced.
The builders spent decades analyzing the system before they reached their conclusion, Arya explained.
Every major component of this solar system was artificially positioned. Your planet's moon, for example, was not formed by a natural collision as your scientists believe. It was placed in its current orbit specifically to stabilize Earth's rotation and create the tidal effects necessary for the development of complex life. Marcus stared at an image of Earth and its moon, seeing them now not as natural celestial bodies but as components in some impossibly vast engineering project.
How could anyone move a moon?
The same technology that could construct an entire solar system, Arya replied. The architects possessed the ability to manipulate matter and energy on a scale that current galactic civilizations can barely comprehend. They could move planets, ignite stars, and create the precise conditions necessary for life to develop exactly as they intended.
But why? Marcus asked. Why build an entire solar system just to create life on one planet?
That is the question that consumed the builders for the remainder of their time here, Arya said. They found evidence that the architects had constructed dozens of similar systems throughout this galaxy and others. Each one was designed to produce a specific type of intelligent life under carefully controlled conditions. The display shifted to show other star systems, each one marked with symbols indicating artificial construction.
Marcus counted at least 20 similar systems within a relatively small area of the galaxy.
It appears that the architects were conducting some kind of vast experiment, Arya continued. Each system was designed to produce intelligent life with specific characteristics.
Some emphasized physical strength, others mental capacity, still others social cooperation or individual innovation.
What were we designed for?
Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer.
That is where the builders' research became particularly interesting, Arya said. Your species appears to have been designed for something they called adaptive synthesis. You have the unique ability to take technologies, ideas, and concepts from other species and not just copy them, but improve upon them and combine them in new ways. Marcus thought about human history, about the way civilizations had always borrowed from each other and built something greater than the sum of their parts.
Is that unusual?
Extremely, Arya confirmed. Most species that reach spaceflight develop along very rigid technological paths. They excel in specific areas but struggle to innovate outside their natural strengths. Your species appears to have been designed specifically to break those limitations. The builders believed that humans were intended to be what they called galactic integrators, Arya continued. A species capable of bringing together the best aspects of all other civilizations and using them to solve problems that no single species could handle alone. The implications of what Arya was telling him slowly began to sink in.
So we're not just random life that happened to evolve. We're the product of some ancient experiment?
That is correct.
But there is more.
The builders discovered that the architects left something for you. The holographic display focused on a region of space at the outer edge of the solar system, beyond Pluto's orbit. Marcus could see what appeared to be a structure, though it was partially hidden behind some kind of energy field that made it difficult to make out clearly. They built a facility in your outer system, Arya explained. Based on the energy signatures, it appears to contain technology and information specifically intended for your species when you reach a certain level of development.
What kind of technology?
The builders were not able to penetrate the facility's defenses to find out, Arya admitted. It appears to be programmed to activate only when approached by humans who have achieved spaceflight and certain other developmental milestones. Marcus stared at the image of the mysterious facility.
Have we reached those milestones?
Based on my analysis of your current technological capabilities, yes. Your species has developed nuclear technology, achieved orbital flight, and established global communication networks.
These appear to be the minimum requirements the architects established for access to the facility.
The display shifted again, showing the approaching harvester ship. It was massive, easily the size of a small city, and its energy signature was growing stronger as it approached Earth. This is why the timing of your discovery is so concerning, Arya said. The approaching harvester ship will almost certainly detect the architect facility once they begin detailed scans of your solar system. If they realize what it contains, they will stop at nothing to claim it for themselves. Marcus began pacing again, his mind racing through the implications.
So our options have just gotten worse.
If we run, we abandon the most important archaeological discovery in the galaxy to a species that will probably use it to conquer everyone else. If we stay and fight, we're facing an enemy that outguns us by millions of years of technological development. There is one more option, Arya said quietly. One that the builders considered but never implemented because it was deemed too dangerous. At this point, I think we're past worrying about dangerous, Marcus replied. We could attempt to activate the architect facility ourselves. Marcus stopped pacing and turned to stare at Arya's interface.
Is that possible? In theory, yes.
This ship contains the access codes and navigation data necessary to reach the facility.
However, the builder's records indicate that the facility's defenses are specifically designed to test anyone who approaches it.
The tests are potentially lethal, and there is no guarantee that even if we succeed in activating it, the technology inside would be helpful for our current situation.
What kind of tests? Unknown, Arya admitted.
The builder's scans could only penetrate the outer layers of the facility's defenses. But, based on other known architect sites throughout the galaxy, the tests typically evaluate intelligence, creativity, moral character, and the ability to make decisions under extreme pressure.
Marcus laughed bitterly. Moral character? The fate of the human species depends on whether I can pass some ancient alien ethics exam?
The architects appear to have been very concerned about ensuring that their technology was only used by species that would employ it responsibly, Arya explained. Most of their facilities include safeguards designed to prevent access by aggressive or destructive civilizations.
And if we fail the tests?
The facility will likely self-destruct, taking us with it and ensuring that its technology can never be accessed by anyone. Marcus walked over to one of the wall panels and pressed his forehead against its cool surface. The weight of the decision was crushing. 47,000 years of waiting had led to this moment, and the choice he made in the next few hours would determine not just the fate of humanity, but potentially the balance of power in the entire galaxy. How long would it take to reach the facility, he asked. Approximately 14 hours at maximum velocity, Arya replied.
However, we would need at least 6 hours to prepare this ship for the journey.
The engines have been dormant for millennia and require extensive pre-flight checks.
And the harvester ship?
Will reach Earth's orbit in 17 days. If we are successful and active 6 hours later, Marcus found himself crouched in the maintenance tunnels beneath the Hoover Dam, following Arya's precise instructions as he attached strange crystalline devices to the main power transmission lines. The devices hummed with their own internal energy, and Marcus could feel the hair on his arms standing up from the electromagnetic fields they were generating. Connection established, Arya's voice whispered through the small communication device she had fabricated for him.
I am now able to draw power directly from the dam's output. Beginning phase 1 of the startup sequence.
Marcus carefully backed away from the transmission lines, trying not to think about the fact that he was essentially stealing enough electricity to power a small city. Arya had assured him that her power tap would appear to the dam's monitoring systems as a gradual increase in normal load, nothing that would trigger immediate investigation.
How long before someone notices? Marcus whispered back.
I estimate we have approximately 8 hours before the power drain becomes significant enough to warrant detailed investigation, Arya replied.
By then, we should be well beyond Earth's orbit.
Marcus made his way back through the tunnels toward the exit point Arya had identified for him. The entire infiltration had taken 3 hours, most of it spent waiting for security patrols to move away from critical areas. He felt like a character in some impossible spy movie, except the stakes were considerably higher than anything Hollywood had ever imagined. As he climbed back up toward the surface, Marcus could feel his phone vibrating with updates from Arya. The ship's systems were coming online faster than expected, and her preliminary scans of the outer system were already providing new information about the architect facility. Marcus, Arya said as he reached his car, I have both good news and concerning news. Give me the concerning news first, Marcus replied, starting the engine and beginning to drive back toward the ship's location. My improved sensor readings of the approaching harvester vessel indicate that it is larger and more heavily armed than I initially calculated, Arya said. It appears to be not just a harvester, but a full conquest fleet. My estimates of their crew size were off by a factor of 10.
Marcus felt his stomach drop. How many are we talking about?
Approximately 150,000 individuals, plus automated systems and combat drones.
This is not a resource extraction operation. This is a full-scale invasion force. And the good news?
The architect facility is showing signs of activation, Arya said. My power-up sequence appears to have triggered some kind of response from the structure. It is now emitting a much stronger energy signature, and I am detecting what appears to be a communications beacon aimed directly at Earth. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter.
What kind of communications beacon? Unknown. The signal is encoded using mathematical principles that I do not recognize.
However, the very fact that it is responding to my presence suggests that the facility is indeed programmed to interact with your species when you achieve spaceflight capability. As Marcus drove through the desert toward the ruins, he could see something that hadn't been there when he left. A soft glow was emanating from the direction of the buried ship, barely visible against the star-filled sky but definitely present.
Arya, are you doing something that's making the ship glow? Negative. The illumination you are seeing is a byproduct of the facility's activation sequence.
It appears that powering up this vessel has created a resonance effect with architect technology throughout the solar system. Marcus pulled up to the ruins and got out of his car, staring at the ethereal light rising from the excavation site. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, a visible reminder that he was dealing with forces far beyond human understanding. As he descended back into the ship, Marcus was amazed by the transformation that had taken place. The vessel was now fully illuminated, revealing the true scope of its interior spaces. What he had thought was a single large chamber was actually just the command center. Corridors led off in multiple directions, and he could see additional levels both above and below his current position. "Welcome back," Arya said as he approached the central cylinder. Her holographic interface was now much more detailed and lifelike, appearing almost human except for the faint blue glow around her edges. "You look different," Marcus observed.
Full power allows me to utilize my complete personality matrix, Arya explained.
What you were interacting with before was essentially my emergency backup consciousness. Now I am operating at full capacity for the first time in 47,000 years. Marcus could see the difference immediately. Arya's responses seemed more natural, more emotional. There was a complexity to her expressions that hadn't been there before.
"How do you feel?" Marcus asked.
"Grateful," Arya replied without hesitation.
"And terrified."
"I have been alone with my thoughts for longer than most civilizations have existed. The prospect of finally completing my mission is both exhilarating and overwhelming." Marcus walked over to one of the wall displays, which now showed a real-time view of the outer solar system. The architect facility was clearly visible now, a brilliant point of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the ship's engines.
"It's beautiful," he said. "And incredibly dangerous," Arya added.
"I have been analyzing the signal patterns from the facility, and I believe I understand what we are going to face when we arrive."
"Tell me."
"The architects did not simply leave technology for your species to discover," Arya explained.
"They left a test.
Specifically, they left a scenario that will require you to make choices that will determine not just whether you gain access to their knowledge, but what kind of civilization your species will become."
"What kind of choices?"
"Based on similar facilities that other species have encountered, you will likely be presented with multiple options for how to use architect technology," Arya said. "Each option will have different consequences, not just for humanity, but for other species throughout the galaxy." Marcus felt a familiar weight settling on his shoulders.
"So the test isn't just whether we're smart enough to access the technology. It's whether we can be trusted with it." "Exactly."
The architects appear to have been deeply concerned about the long-term consequences of advanced technology. They designed their tests to identify species that would use their knowledge to protect and nurture life rather than exploit and destroy it.
"And what happens if we fail?"
"The facility will likely erase all evidence of its existence and ensure that no one else can ever access what was hidden there," Arya replied. "But failure might not just mean death for us. It might mean the end of any chance for your species to survive what is coming."
Marcus studied the approaching invasion fleet on the display.
The ships were massive, their energy signatures growing stronger as they moved deeper into the solar system. Even with architect technology, humanity would be facing a fight for survival against odds that seemed impossible.
"How much time do we have once we reach the facility?" Marcus asked. "Unknown."
Previous encounters with similar architect sites have lasted anywhere from a few hours to several weeks, Arya said. The complexity of the test appears to scale with the importance of the technology being protected.
"And you think this facility contains important technology?"
"Marcus, based on the energy readings I am detecting, I believe this facility contains the most advanced architect technology ever discovered," Arya replied. "We may be looking at knowledge that could reshape the fundamental laws of physics."
The implications of that statement hung in the air between them. Technology that could reshape physics would be more than just advanced weapons or faster than light travel.
It would be the power to literally rewrite reality.
"Are we ready to launch?" Marcus asked. "All systems are operational," Arya confirmed. "However, I need to ask you something important before we begin. Are you certain you want to do this?"
Once we leave Earth's orbit, you will be the first human being to travel beyond your home planet. You will see things that no member of your species has ever seen.
And you may never return home.
Marcus thought about his empty apartment, his failed marriage, his lost job, and all the other ways his life had been falling apart. Then, he thought about the 6 billion people who had no idea that an invasion fleet was heading their way, and who would never have a chance to make this choice for themselves.
I'm sure, he said.
Then, let us begin, Arya replied.
Initiating launch sequence.
Estimated time to arrival at the Architect facility, 14 hours. Marcus felt the ship begin to move, a sensation unlike anything he had ever experienced. There was no vibration, no sense of acceleration, just a subtle shift in the quality of the air around him that told him they were no longer in contact with the ground. Through the wall displays, he watched the Earth fall away beneath them, shrinking from the only world he had ever known to a small blue dot in a vast ocean of stars. They were committed now to a path that would either save humanity or ensure its destruction. As they accelerated toward the outer edge of the solar system, Marcus tried to prepare himself for whatever tests awaited them at the Architect facility. The fate of not just his species, but potentially all life in the galaxy, would soon depend on choices he could never have imagined making. The ancient ship carrying the last hope of humanity raced through the darkness toward a rendezvous with destiny, while behind them, an invasion fleet continued its inexorable approach toward Earth. In less than 2 weeks, everything would be decided, one way or another. Marcus settled into the command chair that Arya had prepared for him and tried not to think about all the ways this impossible plan could go wrong. There was nothing to do now but wait and hope that 47,000 years of preparation had been enough to save them all. 13 hours into their journey, Marcus stood before the observation deck watching the Architect facility grow larger in the distance. What had appeared as a simple sphere from Earth's vicinity was revealing itself to be far more complex as they approached. The structure seemed to shift and change as he watched, surfaces that appeared solid one moment becoming transparent the next, revealing glimpses of impossible geometries within.
It's not entirely in our dimension, is it? Marcus asked.
Correct, Arya replied, her holographic form appearing beside him. Approximately 60% of the facility exists in parallel dimensional spaces. What we are seeing is essentially the tip of an iceberg that extends through multiple layers of reality.
How is that even possible?
Architect technology operates on principles that current galactic science cannot fully explain, Arya admitted. They appear to have mastered the manipulation of spacetime itself, allowing them to create structures that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As they drew closer, Marcus could see that the facility was not a single structure but rather a complex of interconnected modules, each one potentially larger than the ship they were traveling in. Energy patterns flowed between the modules like rivers of light, creating a constantly shifting display of colors that had no names in any human language. I'm detecting response signals from the facility, Arya announced. It appears to be scanning our ship and attempting to establish communication protocols.
What kind of protocols?
The initial contact appears to be focused on species identification and technological assessment, Arya explained. The facility is evaluating our capabilities and determining what level of testing is appropriate. Marcus felt his heart rate increase.
And what level of testing are we looking at?
Based on the facility's response patterns, we appear to have qualified for what the Architect databases classify as a transformation trial, Arya replied, her tone becoming more serious.
That doesn't sound good.
A transformation trial is reserved for species that the Architects believed had the potential to become what they called galactic shepherds, Arya explained. Civilizations capable of guiding and protecting the development of other species across multiple galaxies. Marcus stared at the facility, trying to process the implications.
They thought humans could become responsible for protecting other civilizations?
The builders reached the same conclusion, Arya confirmed. Your species possesses a unique combination of traits that the Architects valued highly: adaptability, creativity, empathy, and the ability to synthesize knowledge from multiple sources into new solutions.
But if we fail the trial?
According to the records, failure of a transformation trial results in the complete sterilization of the candidate species' home system, Arya said quietly. The Architects believed that a species capable of becoming galactic shepherds but choosing instead to use advanced technology for destructive purposes represented an unacceptable threat to all other life.
Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The stakes had just gotten exponentially higher. They weren't just fighting to save Earth from the approaching invasion fleet.
They were fighting to prevent the complete annihilation of humanity by the very people they were hoping would save them.
Are you telling me that if we fail this test, the Architect facility will destroy Earth itself?
That is my understanding of the protocols involved, yes, Arya replied. However, I should point out that the builders believed your species had an exceptionally high probability of success. They spent decades analyzing human behavior and concluded that you possess the moral and intellectual framework necessary to pass even the most stringent Architect tests. Based on studying Stone Age humans, Marcus pointed out.
We've had 47,000 years to develop new ways to disappoint ancient aliens.
Actually, the builders updated their assessments continuously until they departed, Arya said. Their final evaluation, completed just before they left the solar system, concluded that humanity's moral development was progressing along optimal parameters.
Let me guess.
That was before we invented nuclear weapons and world wars. The builders factored conflict and technological militarization into their projections, Arya replied. Most developing species go through a phase where they discover weapons of mass destruction. The critical factor is whether they learn to control those weapons rather than being controlled by them. Marcus thought about the 20th century, about the Cold War and the nuclear standoff that had brought humanity to the brink of self-destruction. But he also thought about the gradual reduction of nuclear arsenals, the international treaties and cooperation that had followed.
So we passed that test? According to the builders' models, yes.
Your species demonstrated the ability to step back from the brink of self-annihilation and begin working toward cooperative solutions to global problems. The ship shuddered slightly as they entered the facility's outer influence zone. Marcus could feel a strange tingling sensation, as if the air around him was charged with some kind of energy that his nervous system wasn't designed to process. Beginning docking procedures, Arya announced. Marcus, I need you to prepare yourself mentally for what we are about to encounter. The transformation trial will likely present you with scenarios that challenge not just your intelligence, but your fundamental beliefs about right and wrong.
What kind of scenarios?
Based on records from other Architect sites, you may be asked to choose between saving your own species and protecting others, Arya explained. You may be presented with technological options that could solve humanity's immediate problems but at the cost of long-term consequences for galactic civilization. Marcus walked over to the command chair and sat down, watching through the displays as their ship was guided into what appeared to be a docking bay inside the facility. The bay itself defied physics, appearing both massive and intimate at the same time, as if the space was adjusting itself to accommodate their vessel. Arya, Marcus said, if something happens to me in there, if I don't make it out, I want you to return to Earth and try to help them prepare for the invasion. I appreciate the sentiment, Arya replied, but that will not be possible. This type of Architect facility requires the continuous presence of the test subject throughout the trial.
If you fail or are unable to complete the test, I will be trapped here along with you.
So we both succeed, or we both die.
That is correct. The ship settled into the docking bay with a gentle thump.
Around them, the facility began to come alive with new energy patterns, and Marcus could hear what sounded almost like music emanating from the walls themselves. The facility is ready to begin the trial, Arya announced.
Are you prepared?
Marcus took a deep breath and stood up from the command chair. As ready as anyone can be to take a test designed by billion-year-old aliens to determine the future of the galaxy. That is an excellent attitude, Arya said with what might have been a smile. Remember, Marcus, the builders chose your species for this role because they believed you had the wisdom and strength to succeed.
Trust in that assessment.
Marcus walked toward the exit that Arya indicated, which led to an airlock connecting their ship to the facility proper. As the airlock cycled, he found himself thinking about all the people back on Earth who had no idea their fate was being decided by an unemployed metalworker in a structure at the edge of the solar system.
The inner airlock door opened, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch infinitely in both directions.
The walls were covered in symbols similar to those he had seen on Arya's ship, but these were different, more complex, constantly shifting and evolving as he watched. Welcome, human, a voice said, speaking in perfect English but with harmonics that suggested it was being generated by something far more sophisticated than vocal cords.
I am the guardian of this facility. You have been selected to undergo the transformation trial. Are you prepared to accept the responsibilities that success will bring?
Marcus stepped into the corridor, feeling the weight of 6 billion lives on his shoulders.
I'm prepared to try.
Then, let us begin, the Guardian said. The first test will evaluate your understanding of sacrifice and consequence. You will be presented with 5 scenarios. In each scenario, you must choose between 2 options, each of which will have far-reaching implications for your species and others. Your choices will determine whether you proceed to the next phase of the trial. The corridor around Marcus began to shift and change, transforming into what appeared to be a command center overlooking Earth. Through the viewports, he could see the approaching invasion fleet, now only days away from Earth's orbit.
Scenario 1, the Guardian announced.
You have been given control of a weapon capable of destroying the approaching invasion fleet instantly. However, using this weapon will also render Earth uninhabitable for the next 1,000 years.
Do you save your species by destroying their home, or do you preserve Earth and allow the invasion to proceed? Marcus stared at the tactical display showing the massive alien fleet approaching his home planet.
The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical force. This was just the first test, and already he was being asked to choose between the survival of humanity and the preservation of their world. He thought about Aria's words about humans being designed as adapters and synthesizers. Perhaps the answer wasn't to choose between the 2 options presented, but to find a third option that the test designers hadn't considered.
I need more information, Marcus said. What other resources are available? What technologies does this facility contain that might allow for alternative solutions?
The Guardian was silent for a moment, and Marcus wondered if he had already failed by refusing to choose between the given options. Interesting, the Guardian finally said. Most species immediately select one of the 2 presented choices.
You are seeking additional information to create new possibilities. This response is promising. Very well, human. Let us explore what alternatives your species might devise.
As the command center around him began to shift and change again, revealing new displays and control systems, Marcus realized that the real test wasn't about choosing between impossible options. It was about refusing to accept that impossible choices were the only options available. The transformation trial had begun, and the future of human civilization hung in the balance. But, for the first time since this incredible journey started, Marcus felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they might actually have a chance to win.